Hello everyone, welcome to Econ 308. This is our first video since leaving for spring break and then everything melting down with the coronavirus. No one's going to classes anymore. They locked up campus. I had to go turn in my keys the other day. It's been a whole mess. You've been here, you know. I figured we'd start doing a few videos each week, maybe 3 videos between 10 and 15 minutes long. We'll see how it goes. I really want to hear your feedback as I give you these videos. And how we can make the course better as we go along, because you've already paid for your tuition. You deserve to finish your courses this semester. Many of you are needing to graduate or do other things and need this for your course requirements. So we're going to continue on. I'm not going to make the course terribly hard moving forward because we all have enough things to deal with. So we'll try to moderate that as we go along. Like I said, this is the first video that we're doing. Today we're just going to cover some stuff from last week, including median voter theorem, incentives, and then we're going to move on to managerial dilemmas. Okay, so what is the median voter theorem? It's a really simple idea that seems to take hold in a lot of situations. Most importantly, of course, is voting. And so, if we just look at a very simple spectrum, in the United States, for example, other countries have more varied segments of society. We have a two-party system. So here on the left, we have like the Democrats and like the further radical groups here. On the right, there's also like the Republicans and further alt-right groups there. And here in the middle, we have what are called centrists. And these are the people in the center. And the way the political process works, or has been theorized to work, especially with public choice or James Buchanan, is that people who vote based on party trade votes with one another. So you have people here who identify this level of leftness, if you want to call it that, and people here at this level of leftness. And they don't agree necessarily on the same things. Perhaps these are far more radical and these people are far more moderate. But they all belong to the Democratic Party, which is this way onward. And so even though they might disagree on something, they'll vote for each other's policies just to keep some coherent group together. And this is what we call trading votes. Because and if you think about it, some people are very much single issue voters, and they'll vote for whatever party represents their views the best on that one single issue. And so they trade their vote in and vote for whatever the party's going with in order to advance their own goals. Some people are more multi-issue and more multifaceted, but we don't really want to get into that right now. But I think you all understand that. And so what the median voter theorem says is that there are voters, of course, on each side, but there's a lot of voters here clustered in the middle. And the further out you go, the fewer and fewer voters there are. Like there's a lot fewer people who are pure communists or pure socialists or pure communists than there are people who are even at this level or this level. Think of this as being a normal distribution. Like when you see this graph, we'll move this down here. Like there's very few people that tails, a lot of people in the middle, and then back down on the tails. It's probably more normally distributed than that. And so, as political candidates begin their presidential campaigns, a lot of the first ones are very ideologically leaning. Like they really say things that are far to the right or far to the left of the general discourse in order to capture these votes out here. But the closer and closer and closer and closer we get to the election, the less ideologues they become, and the less ideological they will become. In order to capture not only these votes, but these votes too, and that ends up leaving them in the dust. We've talked about inframarginal people before, and so in order to capture the marginal person over here, they have to provide a lower quality good or lower quality campaign to the inframarginal people. And so as we move towards the general election, you'll see that the people who ultimately end up in the presidential campaigns become a lot more vanilla, as you will. And you've already seen that given who's won the presidential debates. You had a wide berth of people in the beginning, and now you have 2 or 3 candidates who all are really similar and will capture a huge portion of these votes. And what the median vote theorem says in general is like whatever candidate best captures the wants and needs of the center, or the expectations of the center, they will ultimately win. And so let's say, for example, a Republican candidate who ends his or her campaign right here will only capture votes up until this point. And let's say that the Democratic campaign goes from here. And so they'll receive all of these votes. And that leaves this in the middle. And so what ultimately happens if you split this in the middle again, the Democrat will gain these votes and the Republican will gain these votes, thus giving the Democrat the clear majority of votes. And that's all that the median voter theorem says. It's like whoever captures the center is most likely to win. And so people tend to trend towards the center the closer and closer we get to an election, because these are the swing voters. These are the people who might not necessarily vote just along party lines. All right, I hope that makes sense. All right, the next big topic we want to talk about, which kind of leans in to the managerial dilemmas, which we'll get to in a second, is incentives. And in the notes that I handed out on Blackboard, I talked all about incentives. I specifically talked about like how I incentivize my children to read or do their chores by giving them points which they can earn, either like Pokemon cards or video game time, etc. Granted, during the coronavirus thing and then the recent outbreak, they don't have school. They're getting a lot more game time because honestly, I can't teach them 8 hours a day. But still, they still have incentive. They still have to clean their rooms. They still have to do dishes, take out trash, or what have you, to earn extra points when they don't have free time for games. And so, in a lot of ways, society incentivizes people to cooperate. Think about all of the different rules you have, all the different operations you do, and if you break those rules, you increase your transaction costs or punished socially. And so that kind of narrows you down into a space to where you operate within a society as a being of that society. And so the whole idea of society is just forcing you to cooperate through different rules and measures and punishments, and also rewards, so that you become a productive member of it. This has been true for millennia, even back in the nomadic days. You had to be a productive member, otherwise you faced outcast, or the group would leave you, or maybe you just wouldn't survive because if you didn't cooperate enough, no one would come to your back in case of danger. And so incentive structures are really important. I think if you look last week at the unemployment numbers, they reached 2.1 million claims. And I would say that a lot of those are valid, but also the unemployment office, they changed the rules to where there was no waiting period and there was no immediate checking of what was going on. You could just apply for it. So I'd say there's many of those, maybe not maybe 10% of people just applying for unemployment because they could get it now and they're worried about the consequences later. And not necessarily that they just lost their job. Maybe they lost their job a while ago and it wasn't due to coronavirus. But because there's no checking, there's no enforcement of the rules right now, people see that as a free money opportunity, which you see happens a lot. And this idea of incentives really rolls into the book that we're reading, that we're switching now to, because we finished the art strategy. We're going into Gary Miller's Managerial Dilemmas. This is probably one of the best books on organizational theory and economics. I read it as a grad student, and it is absolutely wonderful. I wish I'd read it before. I think that you'll find the art of strategy really prepared you for this book, because this book is not a whole lot of math, but it is a lot of like nitty-gritty application of all the things you learned in the art of strategy. And I hope that you'll learn a lot from it. This week, I'm hoping that you read the introduction and part of the first chapter, because we're going to try to do this one chapter at a time. I know I said we would do an additional book at the end of the semester if we had time. Right now, it looks like that might not be the best idea. We'll see how it goes. If we finish this book really fast, then we'll definitely switch gears. But right now, let's just focus on this one chapter at a time this week, do the introduction in the first chapter, and I'll talk about it today and Wednesday, or however often I can upload the videos. And I'll also provide you my notes. But thinking about incentive structures, and you'll find in the introduction it says this, there are two broad themes in the organizational theory for economics. The first thing is like, as far as management goes, do managers provide the incentive structures for employees to do their work? Which is the old style thought. Like, you know, the managers have the absolute best interests of the business in mind, and it is their job to provide the structures by which the employees operate under. And so then they invent and enforce incentive schemes to make employees continue on working. And that is a very old theory. And the whole idea of agents and principles fits into that framework. We've talked about a lot with moral hazard and adverse selection problems. And so like it's definitely powerful, but it's not the whole truth. Recently, I say recently, in the last 40 years, there's been a resurgence of like a more organic theory of organizational management. And it's such so that we don't treat the managers as purely economic beings in the way that they're normally treated, because in the old style, the manager would just direct his or her ideas to those below him or her, or below themselves. And then if they had the right incentive scheme in place, then all the employees would do their work. But the newer theories of organization really harp on this idea that every individual agent in a hierarchy is an economic agent, whereas the old theory didn't do it as well. And so every one of these people that we see on this list have their own beliefs, their own incentive structures, their own actions and reactions, their own goals, which might differ from the business as a whole. So each one of these people might want to do something that is outside the scope of the business. And you see that a lot because a lot of people shirk. You expect the employees to not work as hard as they could, but then also the management to not work as hard as they could, because maybe they have different goals than what the business is. Or maybe they have goals within the business that are political, because we are all inherently political beings. And so if every one of these is seeking their own advancement, going higher and higher and higher up the group, then maybe the business suffers somewhat because of that. And I think this is more true. And so this book is going to provide some synthesis between the old style organizational economics and the new style organizational economics, using what's called political economy, which all of you should know, given that you're at least in your third year of economics study. And so I'll get more into the chapter 1 in the next video. For right now, I want you to think about like what we've talked kind of like what is the purpose of a business? It's to transform one good or service into another. But also I want you to think about like what is the business in relation to its employees and management? Because it's not necessarily that the business transforms one good to another for its employees and management. It does something else. And your book gives you some clue of that, like the difference between like Ronald Coase and Alan Alchin and what they believed a business to be and what the ultimate scope and power of a business to be. And also, when does a business end? Like, what is the boundary of a business? Think about that. And I think that's really what I wanted to go over today. We'll do another video later this week, at least one more this week for the first chapter of the book. And hopefully we'll finish the first chapter by next Monday and be heading into the second chapter. I did have a couple of, one other thing I wanted to mention. I've offered my free time during the hour that we would have had class to answer questions, but that seems really restrictive. And so if you would rather just drop a question in a discussion board on or one of the thread forums on Blackboard, or just shoot me an email, that's fine. I think that's more efficient. That way, like, you guys aren't having to log on at 1:30 in the middle of the day to talk to me. You can just drop me a note and I'll answer when I can. I think that's more efficient. If you dislike that or have ideas of like how you'd like to see the class improve, just email me. Also, I got all of the groups assigned today. Like, either you sent me your group list, or like I had a list of people who weren't in groups, and so I created a group from them. Make sure that you get your topics into me as soon as possible. The ones I received so far have been really good. We'll talk more about that as time moves on. All right. See ya.